I was invited today to speak in my personal capacity, I suspect because Ranking Member Thompson is familiar with my history, as I've been on the receiving ends of threats and violence due to the work I've done in the name of the law. I experienced intense violence during the insurrection of January 6th, and because I had the temerity to describe it publicly, threats against my life, bomb threats at events I attend, people trying to find out where I live, whether I have a wife or children they can use against me. I have a feeling I will be asked about how the lionization of the insurrectionists solely enhanced their zealotry, about how the mass pardoning of every criminal who assaulted my colleagues and I encourages further lawlessness and violence, about how in the intervening years many pardoned insurrectionists have been rearrested for crimes such as reckless homicide, child sexual assault, threats to blow up government buildings, and a kill list of FBI agents. These are all salient points, and I'm happy to address them. However, the tenor of the press release announced this hearing made it sound like certain participants were going to spend a few hours scratching their heads and pretending not to understand why threats against law enforcement have risen so sharply this year, and I cannot abide such a farce. Law enforcement is predicated on the notion that we are a nation of laws, that anyone who is detained by law enforcement officials will be afforded all the rights and protections that are guaranteed to them by the Constitution. It is this exemplary standard of civil society that compels individuals to cooperate when faced with arrest. Flawed as it is, our justice system aspires to and works toward the goal of truth and equal protection under the law. Unfortunately, this year, broad swaths of federal law enforcement have proven that this is no longer the case. Perjury and contempt of court used to be prohibitive of work in law enforcement, but now it appears to be a prerequisite of leadership. Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, had already been found not credible as a witness in the court of law prior to his appointment. And Greg Bavino, the so-called commander-at-large at Border Control, was found to have lied while under oath in order to justify his use of force against Americans. Even the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, intentionally defied a judge's order to halt the trafficking of prisoners to foreign countries and then bragged about it on national television. I should add here that one of the hallmarks of secret police forces throughout history is operating outside the law, using violence and intimidation to achieve their objectives. Every day I wake up and I'm confronted with more heinous acts by some federal law enforcement, pointing their lethal weapons at protesters and journalists, needlessly assaulting citizens on their own property, threatening to shoot and arrest EMTs for doing their job, holding children hostage to coerce their parents out of their house. One shot a woman who committed no crime several times and bragged about it, saying he fired 5 rounds and she had 7 holes. Many of these absolute embarrassments to the badge keep their face obscured to try and evade any possibility of accountability, and their leadership condones it. If the inhabitants of our country can no longer believe in the rule of law, then they can no longer believe in law enforcement. If they believe they will be denied their basic rights, what motivation do they have to cooperate with investigations, to support law enforcement as an institution? The fact of the matter is that right now, in the United States of America, there is a semi-secret police force abducting people based on the color of their skin and sending many of them via state-sponsored human trafficking to extraterritorial concentration camps. There are still plenty of good officers. I work with them, federal and local. But before we go around the room clutching our pearls, wondering how people could possibly compare law enforcement in this country to the Gestapo, maybe we should take a moment and ask ourselves if there isn't some recent behavior on the government's part that could encourage such a juxtaposition.